Somewhere in the warm blue waters between Cuba and Jamaica, there is a stretch of ocean that sailors once called the Windward Passage. Pull back far enough and you can see it on a map. A narrow corridor of deep water squeezed between two massive islands, with the open Atlantic on one side and the Caribbean Sea on the other. Every Spanish treasure galleon heading home from the New World had to pass through here. Every merchant ship loaded with sugar, tobacco, and indigo had to thread this needle. And every pirate who ever lived knew it. Now zoom out a little further. Follow the chain of islands curving south from Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, then the Lesser Antilles, dropping like scattered pearls all the way down to the coast of South America. This entire arc of islands created hundreds of hidden coves, shallow inlets, and uncharted harbors where a fast ship could disappear in minutes. This was the hunting ground. This was where fortunes were stolen, empires were humiliated, and ordinary sailors became legends. And somewhere in this sprawling maze of water and islands, a ship became the most famous pirate vessel in history. You know its name, the Black Pearl. But here is what the movies never told you. The Black Pearl was not invented by Hollywood screenwriters sitting in an air-conditioned office in Los Angeles. The idea behind that ship, the concept of a dark, fast, terrifying vessel that could outrun anything on the ocean, came from real ships that actually sailed these waters. Ships with real captains, real crews, and real blood on their decks. So forget Captain Jack Sparrow for a moment. Forget the Kraken and the cursed Aztec gold. The true story behind the Black Pearl is stranger, more violent, and far more interesting than anything Disney ever put on screen. To understand it, we need to go back to the early 1700s, to a time when the Caribbean was the most dangerous place on Earth. The year is 1713. The War of the Spanish Succession has just ended, and across the Caribbean, something terrifying is happening. Thousands of trained sailors, men who spent years fighting for the British Royal Navy, are being dumped on shore with no jobs, no money, and no prospects. These were not farmers or shopkeepers. These were men who knew how to sail, how to fight, how to navigate by the stars, and how to load a cannon in under 90 seconds. The Crown had used them when it needed them, and now that the war was over, the Crown had thrown them away like broken tools. So what did these men do? Exactly what you would expect. They kept sailing. They kept fighting. They just stopped doing it for the king. Within 2 years, the Caribbean exploded with piracy. Nassau in the Bahamas became a pirate republic. Tortuga was already a lawless haven. Port Royal in Jamaica, once called the wickedest city on earth, was rebuilding after an earthquake had literally swallowed half of it into the sea, and pirates filled the power vacuum. This was the golden age of piracy, and it lasted roughly from 1713 to 1726, just 13 years. But in those 13 years, pirates captured over 2,500 merchant ships, stole cargo worth billions in today's money, and terrorized every colonial power from Spain to England to France. And every single one of those pirates needed one thing above all else: a ship, not just any ship, a fast ship, a ship that could catch a merchant vessel loaded down with cargo, or outrun a Royal Navy frigate when things went sideways. Speed was survival. Speed was everything. But here is the thing most people get wrong about pirate ships. Pirates almost never built their own vessels. They could not just walk into a shipyard and order a custom warship. Shipyards were controlled by governments, and governments tended to frown on selling warships to criminals. Before we go any further, I need to stop for a second, because what I've been showing you in these videos only scratches the surface. And I realized at some point that the full picture, the actual pirate code, word for word, the real punishment records, the exact treasure division shares, the ports that secretly funded them, it doesn't fit in a video. I put it all into one document, the Black Flag Codex. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now, let's keep going. So pirates did what pirates do. They stole them. The typical pirate career started on a small vessel, a captured fishing sloop maybe, or a stolen coastal trader. something with a shallow draft that could hide in rivers and inlets. The crew would use this small ship to ambush something bigger. Then they would use the bigger ship to ambush something even bigger. It was a ladder. Each capture was a rung. And at the top of that ladder, if a pirate captain was skilled enough and lucky enough, sat a prize that could change everything. A large, fast, heavily armed vessel that could dominate the sea lanes and make its captain a legend. Ships exactly like the one that would eventually inspire the Black Pearl. The name most people associate with terrifying pirate ships is Blackbeard. And for good reason. Edward Teach, or Thatch, depending on which historical record you trust, commanded one of the most fearsome vessels in the entire Golden Age. Her name was the Queen Anne's Revenge. Originally, she was a French slave ship called La Concorde. Built around 1710, she was a 300-ton frigate designed to cross the Atlantic carrying human cargo. She was fast for her size, well-built, and sturdy enough to handle rough ocean crossings. In November of 1717, Blackbeard captured La Concorde off the coast of Martinique. The French crew barely put up a fight. Blackbeard had been terrorizing the area for months, and his reputation preceded him. When sailors saw his flag, most of them surrendered before a single shot was fired. Blackbeard took the ship and immediately began transforming her. He added more cannons, eventually mounting 40 guns across her decks. He reinforced the hull, expanded the crew quarters, and modified the rigging to squeeze out more speed. By the time he was finished, the Queen Anne's Revenge carried more firepower than most Navy frigates in the Western Hemisphere, and she was being commanded by a pirate. But here is the detail that connects directly to the Black Pearl legend. Blackbeard did not just modify the ship mechanically, he modified her appearance. Historical accounts describe how Blackbeard's crew would burn tar and sulfur on the decks during battle, creating thick clouds of dark smoke that made the ship look like it was emerging from hell itself. Blackbeard reportedly wove slow-burning fuses into his beard and lit them before boarding enemy vessels, so his face appeared to be surrounded by smoke and fire. The ship itself was kept deliberately dark. The hull was coated in pitch, a common waterproofing technique, but Blackbeard's crew applied it more heavily than necessary, giving the vessel an ominous black appearance against the blue Caribbean water. A dark ship, wreathed in smoke, commanded by a man who looked like the devil, sailing out of nowhere to destroy everything in its path. Sound familiar? The Queen Anne's Revenge terrorized the Atlantic coast from the Caribbean all the way up to Charleston, South Carolina. In May of 1718, Blackbeard blockaded Charleston Harbor with the Queen Anne's Revenge and 3 smaller vessels. He captured 9 ships in a single week and held the entire city hostage until they delivered a chest of medicine to his crew. A pirate held an entire colonial city for ransom, with 1 ship. But the Queen Anne's Revenge met her end just a month later. In June of 1718, she ran aground on a sandbar near Beaufort, North Carolina. Some historians believe it was an accident. Others believe Blackbeard intentionally wrecked her to reduce his fleet and keep a larger share of the treasure for himself and a smaller crew. The wreck was discovered in 1996, and archaeologists have been recovering artifacts ever since. Cannons, anchors, gold dust, medical instruments, and thousands of other objects have been pulled from the site. The Queen Anne's Revenge is one of the most thoroughly documented pirate shipwrecks in history. But she was not the only real ship that fed the Black Pearl legend. If Blackbeard's Queen Anne's Revenge was the terror of the Caribbean, then the Whydah galley was its rival in speed and audacity. The Whydah started her life as a slave ship, just like the Queen Anne's Revenge. Built in England in 1715, she was designed as a galley, a fast, nimble vessel intended to make the triangular trade route between England, West Africa, and the Caribbean as quickly as possible. Speed was essential for slave ships. The longer the crossing, the more captives died in the holds. Shipbuilders designed these vessels to cut through the water as efficiently as possible, which meant they were also perfect for piracy. In February of 1717, the Whydah was captured by Samuel Bellamy, a man who would become known as Black Sam. And that nickname is important. We will come back to it. Bellamy was 28 years old when he took the Whydah, and he was already one of the most successful pirates in the Atlantic. Born in Devon, England, he had come to the New World supposedly to search for a sunken Spanish treasure ship near Cape Cod. When that plan failed, he turned to piracy instead. Bellamy was unusual among pirates. He was described as handsome, charismatic, and genuinely popular with his crews. He reportedly gave long speeches about the injustice of the class system, calling merchant captains and colonial governors villains of all nations, while positioning himself and his pirates as free men who answered to no one. When Bellamy captured the Whydah, he knew immediately what he had. She was fast, recently refitted, and carrying a fortune in cargo from her slave-trading voyage. Bellamy transferred his flag to the Whydah and began upgrading her. He added 28 cannons, bringing her total to over 30 guns. He expanded the crew to nearly 150 men. But here is the detail that matters for our story. Bellamy's crew, like many pirate crews of the era, maintained their ship with a technique called careening. They would beach the vessel on a remote shore, roll her onto her side, and scrape the barnacles and marine growth off the hull. Then they would coat the hull with a mixture of tallow, sulfur, and tar. The tar was the key ingredient. It waterproofed the wood and protected against shipworms, parasites that could eat through a wooden hull in months. But it also turned the hull dark, almost black. A freshly careened and tarred pirate ship cutting through the turquoise waters of the Caribbean would have looked striking. A dark silhouette against the bright ocean. Something ominous, something wrong. The Whydah's career under Bellamy lasted only about 2 months. In April of 1717, she was caught in a massive nor'easter off the coast of Cape Cod. The storm drove her into the shallows, snapped her mast, and capsized her. Of the 146 men aboard, only 2 survived. The Whydah sank with an estimated 4.5 tons of gold and silver still in her holds. In 1984, underwater explorer Barry Clifford located the wreck. The Whydah became the first authenticated pirate shipwreck ever discovered. The artifacts recovered, over 200,000 individual objects, confirmed her identity, and provided an unprecedented window into the real lives of Caribbean pirates. But what about that nickname? Black Sam. Some historians believe Bellamy earned the name because he refused to wear the powdered wigs fashionable among wealthy men of the era, instead tying his long black hair back with a simple ribbon. Others suggest it came from his ship, the dark-hulled Whydah cutting across the water like a shadow. Either way, a pirate called Black, commanding a dark-hulled ship, feared across the Caribbean. The parallels to a certain fictional vessel are hard to ignore. But the Black Pearl legend does not come from any single ship. It comes from a pattern, a reality of Golden Age piracy that Hollywood accidentally stumbled onto. Real pirate ships were fast. That was their defining characteristic. A pirate vessel that could not outrun a Navy warship was a dead pirate vessel. So when pirates captured a ship, the first thing they did was modify her for speed. They would strip out unnecessary weight. Heavy cargo holds were emptied. Extra decking was removed. Decorative elements, the fancy carvings and gilded railings that merchant ships loved, were torn off and thrown overboard. Everything that did not contribute to sailing faster or fighting harder was eliminated. Then they would step the masts. Pirates often added taller masts and larger sails to their captured vessels, giving them more canvas to catch the wind. A ship that was originally designed to carry cargo reliably could be transformed into something that practically flew across the water. The hull modifications were equally important. Careening, the process of scraping and tarring the hull, was done as often as possible. A clean hull could add 2 or 3 knots to a ship's speed, which does not sound like much until you realize that in a chase lasting hours, Those extra knots meant the difference between escape and the gallows. And the tar. Always the tar. Dark, thick, pungent. It seeped into the wood and stained it permanently. A ship that had been careened multiple times would develop a hull so dark it looked almost black, especially when wet. Now picture this from the perspective of a merchant sailor in 1718. You are standing on the deck of a slow, heavy cargo ship loaded with sugar and rum. The wind is light, the sea is calm, and on the horizon you see a dark shape moving toward you at impossible speed. The hull is black, the sails are full despite the light wind. She is low in the water, lean, stripped of anything that might slow her down. And as she gets closer, you can see the guns, rows of them running along both sides. You have maybe 30 minutes before she reaches you. Your ship cannot outrun her. Your crew of 15 merchants cannot fight her crew of 150 pirates. You know what is about to happen. That dark, fast, terrifying shape on the horizon. That is the real Black Pearl. Not one ship, but a type of ship. A concept. The ultimate pirate vessel, modified for speed and built for terror. Stop for a second. What you just heard about the pirate code is the part that rewrites everything you thought you knew. But it only lands when you see the actual shares, the exact fractions written into the Articles of Agreement, the punishments, the port records, the names of the men who funded them from government offices. It's all in the Black Flag Codex, linked in the description. 5 seconds, grab it now, because what comes next builds directly on it. Link is below. QR code is on your screen. There is another real ship that deserves mention when we talk about the Black Pearl's origins. The Adventure Galley, commanded by Captain William Kidd. Kidd's story is one of the strangest in pirate history because he did not start as a pirate at all. He started as a pirate hunter. In 1695, Kidd was commissioned by the English government to hunt pirates and French merchant ships in the Indian Ocean. He was given the Adventure Galley, a 284-ton vessel armed with 34 cannons and equipped with oars, which allowed her to move even when there was no wind. The Adventure Galley was one of the most advanced ships of her era. The oar system, with 46 oars on each side, meant she could maneuver in calms and navigate shallow waters that would strand a conventional sailing ship. She was fast, heavily armed, and versatile. But Kidd's voyage went wrong almost immediately. He could not find pirates to capture. His crew was restless and threatening mutiny. His funding was running out. And somewhere in the Indian Ocean, William Kidd crossed the line from pirate hunter to pirate. He began attacking merchant ships. He captured the Quedagh merchant, an Armenian vessel carrying a fortune in silk, gold, and other goods. And he kept going. By the time he returned to the Caribbean, he was one of the most wanted men in the world. Kidd's Adventure Galley is significant because she represents another aspect of the Black Pearl myth, the idea of a ship that exists in a gray zone between legitimate and criminal. A vessel that could be sailing under royal authority one day and the Black Flag the next. In the Pirates of the Caribbean films, the Black Pearl is constantly shifting between different hands, different captains, different purposes. She is stolen, recaptured, sunk, raised, and stolen again. That chaos mirrors the real history of pirate vessels in the Golden Age, where ships changed hands, changed names, and changed allegiances constantly. Kidd eventually abandoned the rotting Adventure Galley in Madagascar and sailed the Quedagh merchant to the Caribbean, where he was arrested, sent to London, and hanged in 1701. His body was displayed in a metal cage over the Thames River for 3 years as a warning to other pirates. The Quedagh merchant was discovered in 2007, sitting in just 10 feet of water off the coast of the Dominican Republic. She had been there for over 300 years, within sight of the shore, and nobody had known. Now we need to talk about the ship you actually see in the movies. Because the physical Black Pearl, the one that sailed across cinema screens in 2003, has her own strange story. The production team for Pirates of the Caribbean. The Curse of the Black Pearl needed two versions of the ship. One was a full-scale sailing vessel that could actually move through water. The other was a stationary set piece built on a soundstage for interior and close-up shots. For the sailing version, the production acquired a steel-hulled barge and transformed her into what appeared to be an 18th century pirate ship. The superstructure, the masts, the rigging, the hull decorations, all of it was built on top of this modern barge. From a distance, she looked like a genuine tall ship. Up close, she was Hollywood magic. The design team studied real pirate-era vessels extensively. They looked at ship plans from the early 1700s, examined museum models, and consulted with maritime historians. But they also made deliberate choices to deviate from historical accuracy in favor of visual impact. The Black Pearl in the films is significantly larger than any real pirate ship from the Golden Age. Her hull is impossibly dark, almost supernaturally so. Her sails are torn and black, which no real pirate would ever allow because damaged sails meant reduced speed, and reduced speed meant death. But the torn black sails became the ship's most iconic visual element. They communicated something that historical accuracy never could. This was not just a pirate ship. This was a ghost ship, a vessel that existed outside normal rules. The production also gave the Black Pearl exaggerated speed. In the film's mythology, the Black Pearl is nigh uncatchable, faster than any other ship in the Caribbean. This directly mirrors the real priority of Golden Age pirates: speed above all else. The ship was painted with a special matte black finish that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, giving her a flat, ominous appearance on screen. Real pirate ships coated in tar would have had a similar quality, absorbing sunlight rather than gleaming like the varnished merchant vessels of the era. So while the Black Pearl on screen was a fantasy, she was a fantasy built on real foundations. The dark hull from tar, the emphasis on speed, the intimidating silhouette, the sense that this ship could appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. All of that came from real history. There is one more piece of the real Black Pearl story that almost never gets discussed: the flags. Everyone knows the Jolly Roger, the skull and crossbones on a black field. But the history of pirate flags is far more complex and far more connected to the black ship mythology than most people realize. In the early Golden Age, pirates typically flew two flags. The first was a red flag, called the Joli Rouge in French, which roughly translates to pretty red. This red flag meant the pirates intended to fight and would offer no quarter. If you saw a red flag, it meant surrender immediately or die. The second flag was black, and the black flag had the opposite meaning. A black flag meant the pirates were willing to negotiate. Surrender peacefully, hand over the cargo, and you would probably survive. Over time, pirates began adding symbols to their black flags to distinguish themselves. Blackbeard's flag showed a skeleton holding an hourglass and stabbing a heart. Bartholomew Roberts had a flag showing himself and a skeleton holding an hourglass together. Calico Jack Rackham used the now iconic skull with crossed swords, but the base color was always black. Black flags, black hulls, black sails in legend, if not always in reality. The color black became inseparable from piracy itself. When the Disney screenwriters named their fictional pirate ship the Black Pearl, they were tapping into something that ran much deeper than they probably realized. The blackness was not just an aesthetic choice, it was the color of piracy itself, the color of the flags that flew above every pirate mast in the Caribbean, the color of the tar that coated every pirate hull, the color that meant death was coming over the horizon. And the pearl part of the name has its own connections. The Caribbean was famous for pearl diving, particularly around the islands of Margarita and Cubagua off the coast of Venezuela. Spanish pearl fleets were regular targets for pirates. The combination of black and pearl essentially means pirate treasure, the dark side of Caribbean wealth. The real legacy of the Black Pearl is not about one ship. It is about what pirate ships represented to the men who sailed them. For the thousands of sailors who turned to piracy during the Golden Age, a ship was freedom. Literal, physical freedom. On land, these men were subject to laws, class systems, poverty, and the whims of kings and governors who did not care whether they lived or died. On a pirate ship, things were different. Pirates elected their captains. They voted on major decisions. They divided plunder according to agreed-upon articles. They had a crude but genuine form of democracy, decades before the American Revolution. A pirate ship was a floating republic, and the better the ship, the more freedom it provided. A fast ship meant you could choose your targets. A well-armed ship meant you could defend yourself. A dark, intimidating ship meant your enemies might surrender without a fight, which meant less risk and more profit. The Black Pearl, in both its real and fictional forms, represents this idea perfectly. Freedom on the water. A vessel that answers to no flag, no government, no law, except its own. When Captain Jack Sparrow says, "Wherever we want to go, we go," he is saying exactly what real pirates believed about their ships. The vessel was the vehicle of liberty. The Golden Age of piracy ended relatively quickly. By the mid-1720s, the Royal Navy had cracked down hard. Woodes Rogers, the new governor of Nassau, offered pardons to pirates who surrendered and death to those who did not. Blackbeard was killed in a battle with Lieutenant Robert Maynard in November 1718. Bartholomew Roberts, the most successful pirate of the era with over 400 ships captured, was killed by grapeshot in February 1722. Calico Jack was captured and hanged in November 1720. Within a decade, the pirate republic was finished. The ships were captured, scuttled, or left to rot in harbors from Nassau to Madagascar. The age of the fast, dark, terrifying pirate vessel was over. But the memory did not die. It passed into folklore, then into novels, then into Hollywood, and eventually into the most successful pirate franchise in film history. The Black Pearl that audiences fell in love with in 2003 was not invented from nothing. She was assembled, piece by piece, from the real ships of the Golden Age. The dark hull of the Queen Anne's Revenge, the speed of the Whydah, the gray morality of Kidd's Adventure Galley, the black flags that flew above them all, every coat of tar, every stripped-down hull, every dark silhouette on the horizon that made merchant sailors pray for wind. The Black Pearl was always real. She just had different names. The next time you watch Pirates of the Caribbean and the Black Pearl appears on screen with her torn sails and impossibly dark hull, remember this: you are not looking at fiction. You are looking at the combined ghost of every real pirate ship that ever terrorized the Caribbean. The Queen Anne's Revenge pulling into Charleston Harbor with 40 cannons loaded. The Whydah racing through the Atlantic with 4.5 tons of gold in her belly. The Adventure Galley, her oars churning through calm water while sailing ships sat helpless. Every one of them fast, every one of them dark, every one of them feared. The Black Pearl is all of them. And she always was. If you want to see which real pirate ship had the most insane story from capture to destruction, that video is on screen right now. Subscribe so you do not miss it. I cover pirate history and maritime legends every week.